A lawsuit is being filed against Connecticut's health commissioners and the governor on behalf of residents affected by Connecticut's Ebola quarantine policies. Now, those people who were ordered to stay inside apartments and homes for up to 3 weeks, this was in October 2014, police officers were posted outside their homes, and they've made complaints, challenges, both over the decision to use quarantines to stop the spread of Ebola, and also the procedures that were put in place under this Ebola emergency order that was back in October 2014. Obviously, this could be a precedent case because we're seeing other viruses come in across the United States. We're seeing the start of the Zika virus being found in multiple states already. And part of the reason for this push, for this lawsuit, it may be because of litigation. It may be because they want to claim money. None of these people that were ordered to stay inside their homes for 3 weeks, that were ordered to be quarantined, had any symptoms of Ebola. None of them got Ebola at the end of the day. But it might also be because they want to push for those laws to be reevaluated and changed ahead of future crises. This is a quote from the second-year Yale law student who has been in charge of putting this case together. She said, "We believe the quarantine of asymptomatic individuals did not do any good and did a whole lot of harm." And she went on to say that people who've never shown signs of Ebola can't pass the disease. But many of those who were quarantined were coming back from some of these affected countries. We're told 2 Yale students who were working in Liberia, they came back. They claimed that they were not exposed to any Ebola patients. They were working with the health authorities out there, but they weren't treating Ebola patients. When they came back, however, they were forced to be quarantined. Other examples of a woman who received family members that came over from Liberia because she wanted to keep them safe and out of this Ebola-stricken country. These people claimed they had no symptoms. They were ordered to stay in the apartment. She put them in the basement for 3 weeks. The police officers were outside the home, shining their torch lights. Whenever she left the home, she was identified. It was a scary process. And so these people are now coming forward, and they were saying it was just too harsh, too over the top. No one that was ordered to stay in their home for 3 weeks in Connecticut had any symptoms, and they're trying to claim some money back.
Right, not the best case scenario for anyone. No one wants to be basically on house arrest, quarantined for 3 weeks, not knowing when you'll be let out. I remember that was a big problem because a lot of people weren't sure how long that would actually last for a while. But at the same time, we have to understand what the climate was like during this Ebola outbreak. I mean, a lot of people were getting sick, and given the fact that Ebola spread so easily and can spread so rapidly, that scared a lot of people, and I think that should be standard procedure. I mean, you go, it could be in your system for a long time. You might come back, you might feel fine, but you're not really sure whether or not you have it yet. I think it's better safe than sorry because Ebola could spread very rapidly. So I think the response in the U.S. was good, although I know that on a global scale, the whole world was a bit slow to react, and there's a lot of, condemning the World Health Organization, for example. But I think in the U.S., that was the right thing to do.
In terms of a global scale, 11,000 people died.
Yes.
And so when we saw that coming to the United States for the first time, people freaked out. They wanted to completely stop it at its earliest possible stage. So those first few people that could have been exposed, perhaps it was over the top. Perhaps they didn't need to be put in their apartments and locked up for 3 weeks when they didn't show any signs of symptoms. But these were those first few people, and they really wanted to do everything they could to stop it becoming an epidemic like it had across the world. And they achieved what they wanted to do. We're here now, we're Ebola-free, and everyone's happy about it. However, we do have to think about people's liberties, people's rights. There was one man who claimed that he got depressed from being separated from his son. He ended up quitting his job because of it. And something that's also being brought to light is the procedures that were taking place. People were not informed of their rights, their legal right to challenge the quarantine. They were not given any help. They were not given advice. One lady bought some bleach. This was the lady that was housing her family members that came over from Liberia. She bought some bleach to clean the house because she saw and read that that was what they do in Liberia. They weren't given thermometers to even check their temperatures. There were police standing outside their residence flashing lights. So I get and I understand that this was a scary time for them. But at the same time, I totally hear what you're saying. This was an epidemic that we had to contain. There was talk of martial law. People were freaking out. But one thing that does seem to make a lot of sense with regards to this litigation is the fact that these emergency health laws, they are quite outdated. Dr. Matthew Carter, he wrote in one magazine reviewing this, he wrote that the quarantine definition is very 19th century, making 21st century quarantine options difficult to implement. So perhaps in the wake of things like the Zika virus and other potential viruses coming in, perhaps there needs to be something done to address these quarantine laws so that we don't take away people's human rights for too long.